In the marble corridors of ancient Rome, beauty could be fatal. A noblewoman's laughter, a glance held too long, or a rumor whispered in the wrong ear could seal her fate. Beneath the emperor's palace, far from the sunlight that gilded the city's triumphs, there existed a room where no screams were heard and no records were written. Rome called it the House of Silence. It was not meant for thieves or rebels, but for women of honor, accused not of crime, but of being too alive. The year was the 10th of Tiberius's reign. Rome stood at its most powerful, its legions unchallenged, its streets flowing with the gold of conquered nations. Yet within the polished villas of its elite, terror hid behind veils and perfumed candles. Valeria Metella, wife of Senator Gaius Metellus, had been summoned to the Palatine at nightfall. She was 30 years of age, renowned for her grace and intellect, beloved by poets and envied by rivals. Her only sin had been defying her husband's silence. She had spoken of his cruelty at a private gathering. By dawn, that whisper reached the emperor's advisors. Now, barefoot and trembling, she crossed the marble floor toward a tribunal lit only by oil lamps. 3 men sat before her, her husband, her accuser, and the magistrate of morals. They did not look at her as a person, but as a threat to Roman order. The air was heavy with incense and hypocrisy. "Valeria Metella," the magistrate murmured, "you stand accused of dishonoring the virtue of your house." She opened her mouth to protest, but her father's voice cut through the silence. "Do not speak. It will make things worse." The walls seemed to close in. She realized that her trial was not to determine guilt, but obedience. When the magistrate nodded, 2 guards approached. Her father turned his eyes away. Her husband whispered something she could not hear. In that moment, Valeria understood Rome's true cruelty. It was not death that terrified her, but how easily her name would vanish. They said she would be taken for purification. No one would ever see her again. As the iron door of the Domus Silentiae shut behind her, the last thing she heard was the echo of her own footsteps fading into the earth, swallowed by a city that worshipped virtue yet thrived on silence. Rome had a word for a woman's ruin: flagitium pudoris, the crime of shame. No one ever defined what it meant, because that was its power. It could be anything a man wished it to be. A woman could be accused for smiling at the wrong guest, for appearing in public without her veil, for refusing a touch from a senator too proud to hear the word no. It was a crime that needed no proof, because the accused herself became the evidence. By naming her shame, they made it real. And when the accused was noble, the punishment was meant to be poetic, clean, silent, and unseen. The more respectable her blood, the quieter her disappearance. For centuries, Rome taught that virtue was the breath of the empire, that its women held the fabric of moral order together. But in truth, their virtue was a leash. Every law written for a woman was written to control the men around her, to protect property, lineage, and reputation. Behind the illusion of piety stood fear, the fear that a woman's will could threaten the empire's hierarchy. So they made new sins to trap her. Pride became indecency, grief became rebellion, and intelligence became witchcraft. A whisper from a rival wife could summon a magistrate, a jest from a servant could spark an inquiry, and when a husband spoke against her, even the gods would not defend her. Valeria's sentence began long before she was taken below the palace. The day after her accusation, her name vanished from the household shrine. The servants were ordered not to speak it. Her belongings were removed, her jewelry melted into coin, her letters burned. Rome's purification began with erasure. She was not imprisoned for what she did, but for what she represented, a woman unafraid to speak of pain in a world ruled by men who silenced their own. The empire called her punishment moral correction, but even the priests who blessed the ritual refused to look upon the condemned, afraid that pity might invite suspicion. By nightfall, Valeria's family villa stood dark, its torches extinguished. Her mother knelt by the household altar and prayed, not for her daughter's life, but for her name to remain untouched by disgrace. In Rome, a woman's reputation did not die with her body, it lived or rotted in memory. The following morning, messengers whispered that Senator Metellus had restored the dignity of his house. None dared ask how. The Senate praised his loyalty. The emperor nodded in approval. That same afternoon, a slave carrying a sealed document left the palace. It bore no name, only the mark of the imperial household, a sign that the accused had been purified. Somewhere beneath the marble floors, Valeria breathed the last air she would ever taste as a free soul. And above her, Rome carried on, gilded and merciless, pretending that justice had been done. The summons always came at night. No torchbearers, no public guards, only a curt knock and a scroll sealed with red wax. Those who received it did not speak of it again. It was said that the emperor himself never signed these orders. The command passed instead through shadows, from a senator's whisper to the hand of a palace clerk. When Valeria was led through the garden gate, the moonlight caught the edge of her silk sleeve, and for a moment she looked less like a prisoner and more like an offering. 2 attendants walked behind her, silent and expressionless. Ahead waited the chariot of the Praetorian Guard. Rome slept, but the city's cruelty never did. The Palatine loomed above her like a temple of judgment. Columns gleamed white beneath torchlight, and the marble lions at the entrance seemed to watch her every step. Inside, the corridors were lined with frescoes of goddesses Juno, Minerva, Venus, all painted to remind women that their beauty belonged to men, their silence to the state. Valeria's bare feet left faint prints on the polished floor. Each echo reminded her that she no longer belonged to herself. When the guards stopped before a bronze door, one of them spoke for the first time. "You will stand straight and speak only when addressed." His tone was almost kind, as if rehearsed. The door opened, and the heat of oil lamps flooded over her face. 3 figures sat at a curved table, her husband, Gaius Metellus, in the center, his face carved into stone. To his left, an elder with parchment skin, the magistrate of morals. To his right, a younger man whose jeweled ring marked him as an imperial observer. None greeted her, no accusation was read. Instead, a clerk stepped forward and recited a single phrase, "Valeria Metella," charged with the corruption of dignity and the disturbance of peace within the household. That was all. No names of witnesses, no account of deeds. In Rome, words were sharper than blades, and once spoken, they cut truth itself. Valeria tried to meet her husband's eyes, but he looked past her, addressing the magistrate. "Rome cannot afford disorder in its highest houses," he said. "The gods themselves demand purity." His voice trembled slightly, not from guilt, but from performance. He was building a reputation of piety. The magistrate nodded slowly. "For the preservation of virtue," he replied. Then he lifted a small bronze seal and pressed it onto a parchment. The sound of wax hissing on hot metal marked the end of her life as she knew it. The guards moved closer, but she did not resist. Her lips parted, not in plea but in disbelief. "Is this justice?" she whispered. No one answered. Even the gods painted on the walls looked away. The magistrate turned to the attendant. "Take her below," he said softly, as though sending a message rather than a person. The door closed, and the world above resumed its supper feasts, its laughter, and its politics. But beneath the palace, the house of silence waited, patient and cold, ready to swallow another woman whose only sin was having a voice. The descent began with the sound of water. Beneath the palace, marble gave way to rough stone, and torchlight flickered across walls streaked with damp. Valeria's steps echoed softly as she was led down the spiraling corridor. The air grew heavier, colder, and alive with the smell of incense and iron. 2 guards stopped before a narrow archway carved with Latin words she could barely read. "Per silentium purgatio," purification through silence. Beyond it waited a small chamber lit by a single brazier, its flames trembling like a dying prayer. At the center stood the Cella Poenalis, the punishment seat of Rome's noblewomen. It was made of polished marble, carved smooth where flesh had met stone countless times. An attendant in priestly robes stepped forward, carrying a mask of beaten gold. It was shaped like a woman's face, serene and beautiful, expression frozen in eternal calm. The mask gleamed with reflected firelight, and Valeria felt her breath falter. It was her likeness. Every condemned woman's was. They molded the gold to preserve her beauty even as they destroyed her voice. The attendant spoke in a whisper that trembled through the chamber. You will wear the visage of silence. The air will bear witness to your purification. His words were ritual, memorized and emptied of meaning, yet they struck her like knives. The guards removed her bracelets and wedding ring, symbols of the life she had once lived among Rome's elite. Her gown was loosened, the silk falling like a ghost to the floor. The iron cuffs on the seat gleamed dull and cold. When they fastened her wrists and ankles, Valeria did not cry out. Fear had already dried every tear inside her. She sat upright, breathing the thick incense that now filled the chamber, the sweet scent masking the sour tang of metal. Above her, the priest placed the golden mask over her face, pressing it gently until the cool metal touched her skin. A faint clink followed as the clasp locked behind her head. Through the mask's narrow slits, she saw the last flicker of the brazier dim. The chamber door groaned shut, sealing her inside. The silence was complete, almost holy. Only her breath broke it slow, trembling, then quickening as the air thickened with smoke. The incense burned faster now, its fragrant mist curling into her lungs, replacing the oxygen with suffocating sweetness. She tried to breathe deeply, to fight for air, but each inhale only brought more of the poison Rome called purification. The world narrowed to sound the rasp of her breathing, the soft hiss of flame, the metallic echo of her heartbeat trapped within the mask. When her body grew still, the brazier's flame dimmed to ash. The attendants outside bowed their heads. Virtue restored, one murmured, sealing the door for the last time. Above, in the imperial halls, musicians played for a feast celebrating the empire's moral strength. And beneath their song, Valeria's final breath rose unseen, joining the countless others Rome had silenced in the name of purity. At dawn, the city of Rome glittered as if nothing had happened. Market stalls opened, senators were carried through the streets in litters, and temple bells rang for morning prayer. The empire thrived on the illusion of order, on the belief that sin and chaos were always contained somewhere beneath its polished stones. Yet beneath the Palatine, in the sealed chamber of silence, the air still hung heavy with the scent of burned incense and fear. When the attendants entered at sunrise, they moved with rehearsed precision, eyes fixed on the floor. Valeria sat motionless upon the marble seat, her golden mask gleaming faintly in the dim light. Her skin had grown pale beneath it, her posture serene, as if she had truly been purified. To the empire, that illusion was enough. 2 slaves lifted her body, careful not to leave a mark. The priest of the chamber oversaw every motion, murmuring the same phrase with which he had ended countless rituals before. May virtue be restored through silence. He recorded nothing. There would be no inscription, no record of who she had been. The process was sacred, and secrecy was its sanctity. Her body was wrapped in white linen and carried through a hidden passage that opened beyond the palace wall, where an unmarked carriage waited. The golden mask was removed and placed inside a small bronze chest to be sent to her husband, a token of her obedience, proof that his household had been cleansed. In the upper world, Gaius Metellus stood at his villa's balcony as the carriage arrived. He did not look inside. The chest was set before him by a servant, who bowed and withdrew without a word. When Gaius opened it, the sight of the mask met him like an accusation. The face was flawless, lifeless, beautiful, and suffocating. For a moment, something human flickered in his expression. Hesitation, perhaps regret, but it vanished as swiftly as it appeared. He ordered the mask placed in the family shrine beside the images of his ancestors. Rome would see a man devoted to duty, not a husband haunted by the ghost of his own betrayal. Later that day, he dined with fellow senators who congratulated him for restoring virtue to his household. Toasts were made to honor his courage, his piety, his loyalty to Rome. Every compliment carved a deeper wound he would never confess. The laughter in the hall rose like music above the faint whisper of incense still clinging to his robes. Somewhere beneath the palace, another woman was being led down the same corridor, her steps echoing in the same rhythm as Valeria's had. The empire fed on silence. It demanded offerings of obedience disguised as holiness. And as the evening sun turned the Tiber gold, the house of silence prepared once more to receive its next noble guest. In Rome, purity was not a virtue, it was a sacrifice. and the city never ran out of women to offer. Centuries later, the ruins of the Palatine Hill still hold secrets Rome never meant to tell. In the mid-19th century, beneath layers of ash and marble dust, workers uncovered a sealed chamber lined with fragments of gold. At first, they believed it to be part of a treasury, but when the dust settled, they found shapes thin, delicate, molded into faces. Each mask bore the same haunting expression of serenity, mouths closed, eyes half open, as if caught between life and death. No records described such a chamber. The historians called it a mystery. The poets called it the tomb of voices. Rome, as always, said nothing. Over time, scholars pieced together hints buried in forgotten texts, phrases like purificatio per spiritum and domus silentiae, repeated in imperial archives, always in reference to noble women erased from family trees. The evidence whispered of an unspoken ritual, a system designed not to kill but to erase. The women punished in that chamber had not been condemned by courts or emperors, but by families who valued reputation more than love. Each golden mask was both grave marker and trophy, a declaration that silence had triumphed over truth. The empire's greatness, it seemed, had been built on the breath of its women. Among the ruins, one mask was found shattered. Its fragments bore faint traces of human skin pressed into the gold, and within its hollow was a small imprint, 2 letters scratched by fingernail before death, V.M. Valeria Metella. The name matched a senator's wife, erased from all surviving family records during the reign of Tiberius. Her discovery reignited an old truth Rome had buried, that silence, when enforced by fear, becomes the empire's most enduring weapon. Historians wrote of her courage, of the women who vanished into that marble throat of the city, never to be seen again. But what haunted them most was how easily the world had forgotten. For every monument Rome built, a voice was taken to protect it. Every triumphal arch cast a shadow long enough to cover the graves of those who dared to speak. The House of Silence may be dust now, but its legacy breathes in every society that punishes women not with fire or chains, but with disbelief. The same ritual continues in gentler forms when truth is doubted, when pain is dismissed, when the golden mask is replaced by polite smiles. Valeria's story is not a relic, it is a mirror. It asks us what we are willing to bury to preserve our image of virtue. If her voice could rise from beneath the stones, she would not cry for vengeance. She would only whisper the same words that condemned her. Is this justice? And as long as that question remains unanswered, Rome still stands within us. If stories like this remind you how easily power rewrites truth, remember to subscribe. The past only dies when we stop looking for it.